The night sky over Earth shimmered as something massive appeared in orbit. At first, it looked like a new star, but soon, telescopes picked up the impossible shape of a colossal alien fleet. The world watched in shock as the ships hovered silently, their sleek metallic surfaces reflecting the sunlight. Governments scrambled to respond. Scientists, military leaders, and politicians gathered in secret rooms, debating what to do. A message arrived. It was broadcast in all major languages, a deep, emotionless voice speaking from the unknown. "We come in peace. We seek to make contact with the dominant species of this planet." The message repeated over and over, sending waves of fear and excitement through the world. Some hoped for friendship, others feared an invasion. The United Nations quickly assembled a diplomatic team to respond. A massive space station, the UNS Destiny, was chosen as the meeting place. It was humanity's pride, a symbol of Earth's progress in space. The station orbited just above Earth, and soon, one of the alien ships detached from the fleet and moved toward it. The world held its breath. The aliens called themselves the Exilari. When their ship docked, the first meeting began. The air was thick with tension as the human diplomats entered the conference room, facing the Exilari delegation for the first time. The aliens were tall, their silver-blue skin shimmering under the artificial lights. Their eyes were black, their movements smooth and deliberate. They wore strange armor that looked almost ceremonial, but something about them felt dangerous. The leader of the Exilari, High Commander Zorvac, studied the humans with an expression that was difficult to read. "We have observed your world," he said, his voice calm but commanding. "We wish to guide you toward a future under our protection." The humans exchanged uneasy glances. The words sounded friendly, but there was something in the way he spoke, something that felt less like an offer and more like an order. "We appreciate your interest in our planet," one of the diplomats replied carefully. "But humanity has its own path. We are willing to share knowledge and work together as equals." Zorvac smiled, if it could be called a smile. "Equality." He let the word hang in the air. "Your species is young. You are unprepared for the dangers of the galaxy. Others will not be as merciful as we are." The room grew colder. The humans realized what was happening. This was not a peaceful meeting. This was an ultimatum. Suddenly, alarms blared through the station. A security officer's voice crackled over the speakers. "Emergency alert. Multiple energy signatures detected from the Exilari fleet. They err." The transmission cut off. The humans turned to the Exilari, their expressions changing from diplomatic calm to pure suspicion. Zorvac didn't deny it. He simply sighed as if disappointed. "It is unfortunate that you refuse our generosity," he said, "but we cannot allow a primitive species to disrupt the balance of the universe. Surrender your world, and we will ensure your survival." The tension snapped. The human security team reached for their weapons, but before they could act, Zorvac raised his hand. The air shimmered, and an invisible force threw the guards backward. The Exilari's technology was far beyond anything humanity had seen. The human diplomats, now defenseless, could do nothing but stare as the Exilari warriors surrounded them. Far above, the Exilari fleet moved into position. On Earth, military radars lit up with warnings as the alien ships powered their weapons. Cities, military bases, and satellites were suddenly locked as targets. Humanity stood at the edge of annihilation. But the Exilari had made a terrible mistake. They assumed humanity was weak. They assumed Earth had no defense. They had no idea what was coming. The Exilari fleet hovered above Earth like silent predators, their weapons primed and ready. On the UNS Destiny space station, the tension was suffocating. The human diplomats, now prisoners, sat motionless as the alien soldiers surrounded them. Their weapons, sleek and unfamiliar, pulsed with energy, capable of killing in an instant. High Commander Zorvac stood at the center of the room, his black eyes fixed on the humans. There was no emotion in them, only cold certainty. Your planet will be given a choice, he said, his voice calm. Submit and become part of the Xelari Dominion, or resist and be erased. One of the human diplomats, an older man with sharp eyes, leaned forward. You claim to be peaceful, yet you come with warships. You offer protection, yet you point weapons at us. He shook his head. This is not peace. This is conquest. Zorvac tilted his head, amused. And what can your species do to stop us? He gestured toward the large window behind them. Through it, Earth was visible, a blue and green jewel floating in space. You have no defenses against us. Your technology is centuries behind. Your armies are nothing before the might of the Xelari. He paused, then spoke with finality. You have no chance. On Earth, world leaders watched the unfolding crisis with grim expressions. Military commanders whispered among themselves, waiting for the inevitable order. They had seen the Xelari firepower. Their ships were massive, their energy readings off the charts. Every logical calculation said Earth would fall within hours if it came to war. But the Xelari had no idea what humanity was truly capable of. In a hidden underground bunker, a high-ranking general turned to a row of shadowed figures on a secure video call. We have confirmation. The Xelari have declared hostile intent. His voice was steady, but his hands were clenched. Are we authorized to engage? A pause. Then a voice. Calm, unwavering. Engage. Across the planet, hidden military installations came to life. Deep-sea silos, long considered relics of past wars, suddenly opened. Underground railgun platforms powered up, their barrels aimed at the sky. Satellite-based kinetic weapons, long classified as experimental, now activated with lethal precision. Earth's greatest weapons, hidden from the public and the universe, were about to be unleashed. Above, the Xelari ships began their assault. Energy beams lanced toward key locations, military bases, power grids, communication hubs. Their strategy was precise, their calculations perfect. The invasion had begun. But as their weapons fired, something unexpected happened. The energy blasts never reached their targets. Instead, the sky itself seemed to shimmer, and suddenly, massive bursts of counter-energy exploded in space. The Xelari ships were struck before they could react, their shields flickering and failing. Their communications were jammed. Their sensors, once perfect, were now blind. On the UNS Destiny, Zorvac's head snapped up. His wrist device crackled with static as panicked voices filled the channel. We're under attack. Unknown human weapons. Our fleet is. The signal cut out. The humans in the room did not smile, but their expressions changed. The fear in their eyes was gone. One of the diplomats, a woman with steady hands, folded her arms and spoke calmly. You assumed we were defenseless. You assumed we were weak. She met Zorvac's gaze. You were wrong. Above Earth, the battle turned chaotic. Human railguns, firing at speeds beyond anything that Xelari had ever encountered, tore through enemy ships like paper. Kinetic strikes from orbital platforms smashed into Xelari cruisers, causing catastrophic explosions. Stealth drones, invisible to alien sensors, delivered payloads that disrupted enemy power systems. The Xelari, for the first time in centuries, were caught off guard. Zorvac's soldiers shifted uneasily. Their confidence wavered as reports of destruction flooded in. More ships lost, more weapons failing. The impossible was happening. Humanity was fighting back, and they were winning. Zorvac clenched his jaw. His species had faced resistance before, but never like this. Never against a species they had so thoroughly underestimated. His black eyes flickered with something he hadn't felt in a long time. Doubt. The battle was far from over, but for the first time, the Xelari were no longer certain of their victory. The Xelari fleet was in chaos. What was meant to be an easy conquest had turned into a nightmare. Earth's defenses were supposed to be primitive, but the reality was far different. The sky above the planet burned with explosions as human weapons, unseen and unpredicted, tore through the alien warships. Zorvac stood rigid inside the UNS Destiny, his black eyes locked on the display screen in front of him. It showed a live feed of the battle. His ships, his mighty, invincible warships, were being destroyed. Human projectiles, moving at impossible speeds, shredded through auxiliary hulls. Stealth drones delivered precision strikes, taking out command centers and power cores. EMP pulses disabled energy shields, leaving even the strongest cruisers vulnerable. A deep, unfamiliar feeling settled in his chest. Fear. This is impossible, one of his officers whispered beside him. The Exilari were a species of conquerors. They had taken dozens of worlds without challenge. Yet here, against these humans, they were not just struggling, they were losing. Zorvac clenched his jaw. His mind raced for answers. Humanity's technology was outdated. Their species had no interstellar war experience. So how were they fighting back like this? How had they hidden such devastating weapons? One of his officers turned to him, his voice tight with panic. "Commander, our second fleet is requesting orders. The humans have deployed an electromagnetic net around the planet. Our warp drives are offline. Trapped." Zorvac's hands curled into fists. His ships were caught like prey, unable to retreat, unable to call for reinforcements. The humans had planned for this. They had prepared for an enemy like him. And now, they were striking back with ruthless precision. In orbit, Earth's counterattack was relentless. Railgun platforms hidden on the moon powered up, sending tungsten rods screaming toward Silari battleships. Each impact was like a meteor strike, tearing through alien armor and ripping ships apart in seconds. The Exilari had energy shields, but they weren't designed for this kind of warfare. On the ground, hidden anti-orbital cannons emerged from mountains and deep bunkers, firing hypersonic missiles that weaved through enemy defenses with terrifying accuracy. Human fighter jets, modified with alien-inspired thrusters, engaged smaller auxiliary crafts in dogfights, proving that while humanity's technology was different, it was no less lethal. For the first time, the auxiliary fleet was forced into full defensive mode. Ships scattered, their formations broken. Commands were shouted, desperate maneuvers attempted, but it was too late. The humans had taken control of the battlefield. Inside the space station, the human diplomats, once prisoners, were now standing tall. The balance had shifted. They were no longer at the mercy of the Exilari. One of them, the older diplomat who had challenged Zorvac earlier, stepped forward, his expression cold. "You thought we were weak," he said quietly. "You thought we would surrender." He gestured toward the screen, where another auxiliary warship exploded under a direct missile strike. "You were wrong." Zorvac exhaled sharply, his mind racing for a way out. He had two choices: keep fighting and risk total annihilation, or retreat and admit failure. But how could he retreat? His fleet was still trapped. Their warp systems scrambled. His warriors, trained to believe in the Exilari's superiority, were crumbling under the weight of human resistance. His communicator buzzed, and he activated it. A holographic projection of his second-in-command, Captain Valkyr, appeared. The captain looked grim, his silver-blue skin darker under the emergency lights. "Commander, we have to break formation. The humans are picking us apart. We need reinforcements." "There are no reinforcements," Zorvac said sharply. This was supposed to be a simple operation. Valkyr hesitated. "Then we must retreat." Zorvac's fists tightened. "We cannot retreat. We are the Exilari." Valkyr's expression didn't change. "And they are human." The words hit like a physical blow. Zorvac realized, at that moment, what had gone wrong. The Exilari had assumed humanity was like every other species they had conquered, primitive, disorganized, and easy to intimidate. But humanity wasn't like the others. Humanity was something else. The humans fought without fear. They had prepared for war in ways the Xilari had never imagined. They weren't just defending themselves. They were hunting their invaders, adapting to every Xilari tactic with terrifying speed. Another explosion rocked the space station. The emergency lights flickered as Zorvak's display screen showed one of his largest battleships breaking apart, its engines detonating in a chain reaction. He barely heard the screams of his crew as the feed cut out. The Xilari fleet was dying. Zorvak turned back to the humans. They stood there, watching him, waiting. He saw no mercy in their eyes, no hesitation. If he continued this battle, there would be no Xilari left to tell the tale. He took a slow breath, forcing himself to push back his pride. "What are your terms?" he asked. The older diplomat studied him, then smiled faintly. "Now you're ready to listen." The battlefield was no longer in Xilari control. Their warships, once symbols of unstoppable conquest, were now burning wreckage drifting above Earth. The humans had done the impossible. They had turned the tide against an interstellar empire with technology far beyond their own. But the battle was far from over. On board the Xilari command ship, the Imperium's Wrath, alarms blared. Crew members rushed through the halls, their disciplined movements now frantic as emergency systems tried to contain the damage. The ship's hull had been pierced in multiple locations, and critical systems were failing. High Commander Zorvak stood in the war room, his hands gripping the metal edge of the control console. His black eyes scanned the tactical display, and what he saw made his blood run cold. His forces were scattered, unable to regroup. His battleships were being destroyed one by one. And worst of all, his fleet was still trapped within Earth's electromagnetic field. A young officer approached, her silver-blue skin pale. "Commander, our long-range communications are still down. We can't send for reinforcements." Zorvak already knew. It was part of the human strategy. Cut them off. Isolate them. Hunt them down. Another explosion rocked the command ship. The lights flickered. Zorvak's jaw tightened. "Where is the enemy fleet?" "Surrounding us." The officer swallowed. "They are closing in." Zorvak's breath slowed. Humanity had fought with precision from the beginning. Every move had been calculated, every counterattack devastating. But now, something had changed. The humans weren't just defending anymore. They were preparing to end this. Through the massive war room window, Zorvak saw the human fleet advancing. Their warships, though smaller and less advanced than the Xilari's, moved with terrifying coordination. He could see their railgun turrets adjusting, targeting systems locking onto the crippled Xilari vessels. Their missiles were already in position. They weren't just going to defeat the Xilari. They were going to annihilate them. On Earth, a command bunker deep beneath the surface was alive with activity. General Mason, the head of Earth's defense forces, stood at the center of the operations room. He watched the battle through a holographic display, his face grim. The Xilari were finished, but he knew better than to show mercy. "Prepare the final strike," Mason ordered. The room went silent for half a second before officers began relaying commands. More missiles were armed, targeting solutions finalized. Stealth drones, now positioned behind enemy lines, received their final instructions. The Xilari had two choices: surrender or die. On the Imperium's Wrath, Zorvak's officers were desperate. "Commander, we must escape. If we surrender, we may." "Surrender." Zorvak turned to his officer, eyes blazing. "We are the Xilari. We do not." The war room shook violently. A human railgun strike had pierced the lower decks. Systems flickered, sparks flying from the consoles. Zorvak caught himself against the wall, but many of his crew were thrown to the floor. A red light flashed on the display screen. His second-in-command, Captain Valkyr, turned to him with an expression that Zorvak had never seen on his face before. Not fear, not panic. Resignation. "Commander," Valkyr said softly, "we've lost." Zorvak's breath hitched. Lost. The word felt foreign, unnatural. He had led countless invasions, had seen species kneel before him. Never had he faced an enemy he could not break. Never had he known what it felt like to stand on the other side of victory. And yet here he was. Zorvac looked at the human fleet, still advancing, still preparing to unleash another barrage. He could feel the weight of every decision pressing down on him. The Xilari had underestimated this species. They had believed humans to be weak. But weakness had nothing to do with weapons or technology. It was about will. And humans had more will to survive, to fight, than any species he had ever encountered. Zorvac inhaled deeply. Then, slowly, he reached for his command console. His fingers hovered over the controls. With a final glance at his officers, many of whom now looked at him with silent pleading in their eyes, he pressed the button. A single signal was sent, a message broadcast to every Xilari warship still operational. Stand down. The Xilari fleet, once a force of dominance, began shutting down its weapons, engines powered down, defensive barriers lowered. The war was over. On Earth, inside the command bunker, an officer turned to General Mason. "Sir, we're detecting an energy shift. The Xilari are surrendering." The room stayed silent for a moment before Mason gave a slow nod. "Hold fire," he said. Then, after a pause, he added, "But keep the weapons locked on them. If they so much as twitch, finish them." In orbit, Zorvac stood in silence as his warship systems deactivated. He had made his choice. He had surrendered. And in doing so, he had ensured that the Xilari would never forget the name of the species that had humbled them. The silence after the surrender was deafening. The Xilari warships, once symbols of domination, now drifted in space, powerless. Human railguns, missiles, and stealth drones remained locked on them, waiting for a single reason to finish what had begun. On board the Imperium's Wrath, Zorvac stood in the center of his darkened war room, staring at the tactical display. His fleet status was clear: damaged, outmaneuvered, defeated. The human fleet, still maintaining formation, showed no signs of lowering their weapons. The humans didn't trust him. And why should they? For centuries, the Xilari had operated under a single belief: conquer or be conquered. They had wiped out countless civilizations, taken their resources, enslaved their populations. Surrender was not in their nature, and yet here he was, surrendered. The weight of it pressed against his chest like a crushing force. He turned his gaze to his officers. None of them spoke. They had followed him through dozens of battles, had seen him lead with unwavering confidence. But now, they saw something they had never seen before: doubt. A message appeared on the war room's main screen, breaking the silence. A transmission from the human command ship. A request for direct communication. Zorvac's jaw tightened. He knew what this was. Humanity wanted answers. They wanted to know why the Xilari had attacked. They wanted to ensure that surrender didn't mean another betrayal. For the first time in his long career, Zorvac hesitated before responding. He pressed the command panel, and the screen flickered to life. The image of a human appeared, a high-ranking officer, dressed in a dark uniform. His face was lined with age, but his sharp eyes held no weakness. General Mason. The human studied Zorvac with a cold, assessing gaze. "High Commander Zorvac," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Your fleet has surrendered. State your intentions." Zorvac exhaled slowly. He was used to speaking from a position of power. But now, every word had to be measured carefully. "My intentions," he said finally, "are to ensure the survival of my people." Mason didn't blink. "You ensured their destruction the moment you attacked us." Zorvac clenched his fists. He knew Mason was right. The Xilari had come expecting an easy victory, not a war that would turn into a massacre. Against them, he had underestimated humanity's strength, their resilience, their brutality when pushed. And now, the humans had every reason to wipe them out. Mason continued, his tone colder. You gave us no warning, no negotiation, no chance at peace. Your fleet appeared, and you demanded our surrender. Now that your warships are in ruins, you expect mercy." Zorvac remained silent. What could he say? That he had miscalculated, that he had made the greatest mistake in Xilari history, that he had underestimated the only species in the galaxy that had turned an invasion into a trap. The silence stretched. Then Mason leaned forward slightly. "I'll ask you one more time," he said. "Why did you attack us?" Zorvac hesitated, but he knew there was no point in lying. He met Mason's gaze, his voice steady. "Because we feared you." A pause. For the first time, Mason's expression changed. A flicker of something, surprise, maybe, crossed his face. Zorvac continued. "Humanity is different. You lack the advanced technology of the Dominion, yet you fight as if you have nothing to lose. You adapt faster than any species we have encountered. Your weapons are crude, yet devastatingly effective." He exhaled. "We watched your world from a distance. We saw how quickly you evolved, how rapidly you advanced. We feared what you would become in a century. In two." His black eyes darkened. "So we struck first." Mason's fingers tapped against the table in front of him. "Preemptive war," he said, his tone unreadable. "You feared us so much that you tried to wipe us out before we could become a threat." "Yes," Zorvac admitted. "And now I see. We were already too late." Mason studied him for a long moment. Then he leaned back, crossing his arms. "You're right." Zorvac's brow furrowed. Mason's voice was quiet but firm. "You were too late." He gestured toward the battle outside. "Your forces are in ruins. Your ships are scrap metal drifting in our skies. If we wanted, we could finish you right now." The threat was clear. Zorvac already knew that surrender didn't mean survival. Humanity still had the power to erase what remained of the Xilari fleet. And unlike the Xilari, humans had proven they were willing to strike first when necessary. Zorvac stood straight. "Then what happens now?" Mason considered him. "That depends." A new message appeared on Mason's screen. Reports from Earth's military command. Strategic assessments. Risk calculations. The Xilari were crippled, but the question remained, should humanity let them go? Or should they end the threat permanently? Mason exhaled, then made his decision. "Your fleet will be escorted to the farthest edge of our system," he said. "From there, you will leave. You will spread the word to the rest of your dominion." His eyes hardened. Earth is not to be touched. Ever again. Zorvac's jaw clenched, but he gave a slow nod. "You will release the humans you took prisoner," Mason continued. "And you will leave behind your weapons data, your ship schematics, and any information we find useful." Zorvac stiffened. "You are demanding the secrets of our military." Mason's expression didn't change. "You lost." A silence stretched between them. Then, slowly, Zorvac exhaled. He knew there was no argument to be made. He had gambled on humanity's weakness and lost. He gave a sharp nod. "It will be done." Mason didn't look satisfied. He didn't look victorious. He simply looked like a man who had done what was necessary. "Good," Mason said. "Then get off my planet." The transmission cut off. Zorvac stood there for a long moment, staring at the empty screen. He turned to his crew, to his officers who had followed him into battle. They said nothing, because there was nothing left to say. For the first time in history, the Xilari had been defeated, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The broken remnants of the Xilari fleet drifted in Earth's orbit, their once mighty warships reduced to nothing more than floating wreckage. Fires still burned inside the shattered hulls of some vessels, while others remained eerily silent, lifeless husks of a force that had once been feared across the galaxy. For the first time in centuries, the Xilari were at the mercy of another species. On board the Imperium's Wrath, High Commander Zorvac watched the human fleet as it held position, surrounding the remaining auxiliary ships like a pack of predators waiting for a sign of weakness. He had already given the order to stand down, already accepted the humiliating terms of surrender. But deep down, he knew the humans were still debating one final question. Should they let the auxiliary leave, or should they finish them? Inside Earth's primary military command bunker, General Mason stood before a war room filled with officers, analysts, and political leaders. The battle was over, but the decision before them was just as critical as any strategy they had planned. "We have the chance to wipe them out completely," one officer argued. "If we let them go, they'll come back stronger in the future." Another officer countered, "Destroying them now might provoke their dominion into launching an even larger assault. We've barely survived this battle. What happens when the full weight of their empire comes crashing down on us?" The room fell into uneasy silence. Mason exhaled slowly. He had spent his life preparing for war, but this wasn't just about winning a battle. This was about ensuring humanity's survival. He turned to one of his intelligence officers. "What do we know about their dominion?" The officer pulled up a holographic display, showing a map of the auxiliary's empire. "The dominion spans over 50 star systems," she explained. "But from the data we've gathered, the auxiliary are only one part of it. There are other species under their rule, some willingly, others by force." Mason frowned. "Meaning?" "Meaning that if we execute every last auxiliary soldier here, we won't just be ending one fleet. We could trigger a political collapse within their dominion," she said. "Some factions may see it as a sign of weakness. Others may see it as justification to rally against us. Either way, it won't end here." Mason understood the weight of those words. If they wiped out the auxiliary fleet completely, they wouldn't just be winning a war, they would be starting a new one. He turned back to the display, watching as the surviving auxiliary ships remained motionless in orbit. Zorvac was waiting for an answer. And Mason had made his decision. "Send them away," he ordered. "Make sure they understand. If they return, we won't show mercy again." The order was relayed. Across the human fleet, weapons remained locked onto the auxiliary ships, ensuring compliance. On the Imperium's Wrath, Zorvac received the transmission. His officers looked at him, waiting for his response. He gave a single nod. The battered remains of the auxiliary fleet slowly powered up their engines. One by one, the surviving ships aligned themselves, preparing for a long journey home. As they moved out of Earth's gravity well, Zorvac took one last look at the planet below. Humanity had been meant to fall. Instead, they had done what no other species had ever accomplished. They had broken the auxiliary, and the rest of the galaxy would soon know it. Hours later, the auxiliary fleet was gone, vanishing into the depths of space. Earth remained intact, victorious. But Mason knew the war wasn't truly over. It was just beginning. The auxiliary fleet had left, their remaining ships retreating beyond Earth's gravity well, disappearing into the vast darkness of space. The battle was over, the invaders defeated. But on Earth, the victory did not bring celebration. There was no cheering in the command centers, no wild displays of relief. Humanity had won, but at what cost? Cities lay in ruins, burning craters where millions had once lived. The skies, once filled with auxiliary warships, now carried the thick smoke of fallen buildings and shattered defenses. In the heart of Earth's primary military bunker, General Mason stood before a large holographic display, watching the last auxiliary ships blink out of sensor range. The war room was filled with officers, soldiers, and leaders from across the planet, yet the room remained eerily quiet. The cost of survival was painted across their faces. Mason exhaled, rubbing his temple. The auxiliary were gone, but the next steps were just as critical. A technician turned from her console. "Sir, we have confirmed all auxiliary ships have left our solar system." Mason gave a slow nod. "And the damage report?" Another officer hesitated before answering. 17 major cities have been severely impacted. Infrastructure is down in multiple regions. We're still gathering casualty numbers, but it's in the millions. Mason's jaw clenched. Millions. Across the room, a military strategist spoke up. "General, with all due respect, we should be preparing for the next phase." Mason glanced at him. "And what phase is that?" The man stepped forward, his voice grim. "The Xelari will not forget this. They might have retreated, but they will return. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not next year, but one day. And next time, they won't come with just one fleet. They'll bring an armée." Mason already knew this. Another officer added, "If we don't start preparing now, we won't stand a chance when they come back." Silence filled the war room again. Finally, Mason straightened his shoulders, his voice steady. "Then we prepare." It was the only option. Earth could no longer afford to be just a planet. It had to become a fortress. Humanity had survived because of their sheer will to fight, their ability to adapt. But the Xelari had still been stronger. Their technology had still been superior. If Earth wanted to stand a chance in the future, they needed to change that. Mason turned to his intelligence officer. "I want full analysis on the Xelari technology we recovered. I don't care if it takes months. We will reverse engineer everything. Weapons, ship designs, shielding, whatever advantage they had. We need it." The officer nodded sharply. "Understood." Mason shifted his focus. "I also want the research teams to start working on propulsion systems. The Xelari had faster-than-light travel. We don't. That changes now. We need to take the fight to them before they bring it back to us." More nods. More orders were issued. Humanity wasn't just going to rebuild. They were going to evolve. Days passed. Then weeks. The smoldering remains of war were slowly replaced with the hum of reconstruction. Earth was no longer just recovering. It was transforming. Factories that once built civilian technology were repurposed for warships. Scientists worked day and night to unlock the secrets of alien propulsion, weaponry, and shielding. The first prototypes of humanity's new fleet were already being designed. Across the world, leaders set aside their differences. The invasion had nearly wiped them out. Now they had no choice but to stand as one. For the first time in history, humanity was united. Mason stood on the balcony of Earth's new command center, watching as engineers constructed massive orbital shipyards. The first human-built warships, designed with stolen Xelari technology, were already taking shape. He knew that Xelari would return. But next time, Earth wouldn't be waiting. Next time, humanity would strike first, and the galaxy would never be the same again.